Hi guys, and welcome back to Maltbox, the non-chill filtered whiskey blog. I'm Andy, and I'm back here today with another whiskey review. And the whiskey that I'm going to be looking at today is from the Glenallachie distillery, specifically this, the Glenallachie 12-year-old. Now, I might have reviewed this in the older iteration of Maltbox, I can't remember, but what I will say off the bat is this is a hell of a lot different to the previous bottle that I bought. Now, I purchased this this year, in 2022, earlier in the year, before I decided to start singing randomly at the beginning of videos. Don't worry, it probably won't happen again, or maybe it will. I don't know. Let's see where it takes us. But ultimately, the main difference between this Glenallachie 12 and the Glenallachie 12 that I know of old is this: the colour. It's so much darker than the one that I used to buy. So anyway, guys, so yeah, here's the bottle. You all know what Glenallachie looks like. I'm sure there's probably a wealth, a myriad, a murder of Glenallachie fans out there. So Glenallachie was a relatively unknown distillery, I guess, until Billy Walker came along. It's one of the newer distilleries, I suppose, although you can't really say that now, given all the ones that have been opening in the last 10 years. So Glenallachie have been going since, I think, the 60s or 70s. After Mr. Walker was purchased out by Brown-Forman from Benriach, Glenglassaugh and Glendronach, he basically went straight out again looking for a new distillery that he could impart his influence and bring back to life. And Glenallachie really, historically, was just blend fodder. Not that there's anything wrong with blended whiskey. I'm a big fan of blended whiskey, but as a single malt, it never really got any traction, attention. Its single range was pretty poor. I think there was a Glenallachie Distiller's Choice or something it was called, that was available and still is available, I think, to a degree in local co-ops and things like that, local supermarkets. That was like the 20 quid range. It kind of came out at the same time as the Glenkeith Distiller's Edition or something, which is really random. Again, priced at the lower price point. But since Billy Walker and co. and his cohorts have taken over the distillery, they've reinvigorated the cask management process, as you can already see. Very much putting his stamp on there. Rebranded in these very fetching, funky coloured boxes. And basically giving it a bit of a makeover. So, I mean, the 12-year-old is bottled at 46%. It is non-chill filtered. It is natural colour. So, I mean, again, going back to the colour. The previous bottlings I've had of this is my third bottling of Glenallachie 12, and it's been about a year, maybe 2 years since I purchased my last one. The previous one was more along the lines of, I'm trying to look on a shelf, probably the colour of the Virgin Deanston Oak at the back there. A nice kind of light copper to dark gold. This is just full-on sherry madness. It's nothing like it. So there's clearly either, a massive shift in the cask management process at some point where in the batches it started to come through a little bit more. I mean, clearly there's quite a considerable batch variation in that sense. This one was bottled on... Where's the bottling code? Where's the bottling code? Come on, I know you're on here somewhere. You must be. Well, apparently... here we go. Yeah, there we go. So this one was bottled on the 24th of September 2021. And I picked this up in April or May of 2022. So call it 5 months later. That's terrible maths. No, oh yeah, okay. Somewhere between 6 months and 8 months later, because I can't quite remember exactly what month I bought it. So without further ado, let's take a look at this whiskey. A dark copper, very reminiscent of the Glendronach 15 in colour, if I'm being perfectly honest, on the nose. And it's so much more heavily sherried, just straight off the bat. I remember the old one being very honey-led, and I loved that thick, luscious honey note on the nose. And there was a lot of chocolate on there, and now it's all about that sherry. It's all about prune, it's about raisin, it's about plums. There's a little bit of chocolate still in there maybe, but it's a little bit drier. Fruity. Spicy. Tobacco leafy. slightly tangy and sherried goodness, I suppose. Maybe a little bit of caramel. It's a completely different dram already, and I'm already sort of talking wistfully about the old one because I was a big fan of it. So yeah, I'm trying to remember now, to be honest with you, if it was initially matured in bourbon and then finished in sherry, or if they just switched to full-on sherry maturation. I can't quite recall off the top of my head. No, doesn't tell me. Doesn't tell me. I'm sure you guys know anyway, and probably rolling your eyes and tutting and saying, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, welcome to the channel where I do not know what I'm talking about. That's part of the fun. So again, it's non-chill filtered and natural colour, and that's a good thing, because a lot of Glenallachie's that were accessible in the market previously were not. I'm not as precious about it as I used to be, but I think at the end of the day, it needed a bit of love. And they've got a lot of stock, and that's one of the reasons that Billy wanted to purchase this distillery. It had a lot of waiting stock, just sat there, not doing the right lot. It's quite, historically, from my experience of the old indie bottlings that I've tried of it, it's quite a neutral spirit in its own way, in the sense that I won't say that in a negative way, it's just quite adaptable, and I can see why it was used quite a lot in blending. I think it's a spirit that would impart itself very well to various cask finishes, and maybe re-racking into, wine casks or something, which, I think he has done a couple of times now, and there's been rye cask releases and whatever else, a lot of different casks being used to kind of revitalise, I think, what would otherwise be quite a arguably generic spirit. So there's certainly a lot more life to it now, let's put it that way. Oh, a bit of candy floss. Interesting. Oh. Wine gums. Wine gums as well. So on the palate. Yeah. For me, it's very drying. Very spicy. Again, I don't want to sound like a broken record. I'm not moaning. I suppose I am anyway. I am moaning a bit. The other iterations of the 12 were very honey led, like I said before, certainly in my opinion, were very rich, very voluptuous, very sweet, and I liked that. This is very much the opposite. It's still very rich, but it's incredibly drying, and I was kind of chomping my teeth because getting a real tingle on the front of my gums. I could kind of feel all the moisture out of my head just leaving. It's still quite sweet. It's a lighter sweetness in the sense that it doesn't last as long as a honey sweetness, for example, might, or a maple syrup sweetness might. It's very much a dry, instantaneous sweetness. There's a lot of spice, a lot of black pepper. Tingly gums. There's some blackcurrant in there, a nice rich blackcurrant cordial, which is lovely. Brings a nice fruity dimension into it now, where we're getting some pecans, maybe some walnut. Again, quite rich flavours, very sort of winter sat by a fire kind of thing. You get nut mixes at Christmas and that. Not raisin, I'll probably say sultanas in there. Chocolate now on the finish, but dark, quite bitter. Dark chocolate, good quality dark chocolate. The finish, medium to long. That chocolate pretty much seeing it through for me. Which I'm quite a big fan of dark chocolate, to be fair. That's my go-to chocolate choice. Maybe a bit of honeycomb. Good, but just not as good as it used to be, in my opinion. A lot of people will probably love this now, because a lot of people love this intensity of sherry, and I just don't get on with whiskies that are that heavily sherry. That's just my preference. I'm not sure if these are first fill casks or what. If they're refill, then fair play. Jesus, whatever was in it before, can't have spent much time in it. And particularly from the flavour profile thing as well. I just think it is a very good quality whiskey in its own way. For me, It is certainly one of the better options price-wise at the minute, I guess. The only thing I'd say is when you step up to the 15, and I've never reviewed the 15, although I do have a 15 bottle I will review. For me, the 15 Glendronach 15 still far outstrips the Glenallachie 15, just in my opinion. And I'll probably argue, again, for my taste, the Glendronach 12 probably outstrips this. Not unpleasant in any way, shape or form. You know, I'm never one to say anything negative, or certainly try not to say too much negative stuff about whiskey, to be fair, because we're all here to enjoy it. I just think I preferred the earlier batches. That chocolate, as I'm talking, it's still going, which is nice, but it's kind of turned to like a dry cocoa powder, you know, like you're using baking, like a proper no-nonsense cocoa powder. If you can imagine eating it and it just taking all the moisture out of your mouth and just you try to chew it, just like, oh, what have I done? But I think the nose is probably opened up a little bit more in that time that I've just been chatting, but it's still incredibly sherry focused. And hey, that's what Billy likes. That's what Billy does. That's what Billy do, so to speak. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Glenallachie develops. It's become a very, very popular distillery because, quite rightly, Billy has a lot of fans. People like what he does. A lot of the older, expensive 25-year-old releases recently, for example, sold out very quickly for very, very silly amounts of money. Speaking of money, I think this costs about, at the minute, I'd say at the time of recording, just to be safe, given inflation and creeping costs, anywhere between 40 and 60 quid. But yeah, I think it averages out about 50 quid, to be honest with you, 45 to 50 quid usually. But don't take my opinion for that. We are in very uncertain times. Prices are going up every day. Inflation's horrible. The world is just an absolute dumpster fire. But hey, at least it's Glenallachie, right? So on that note, guys, I'm going to box it off. Thank you very much for watching. I'm on Instagram at maltboxwhiskey, Twitter at maltbox. If you've liked this rant, ramble, whatever you want to call it, feel free to subscribe, but no pressure. Thanks for watching. See you soon.